Yeah. So let's dig deeper into deductions. What other stuff is out there that an e-commerce brand, what is this?
Yeah, so I would say, stating the obvious, the really big difference is when you're an e-commerce brand, and Jessica, obviously hop in if I'm saying anything incorrectly, you're interfacing, invoicing directly with a customer, right? So in theory, 99% of the time it's going to go right. They order something online, you invoice them, they pay for it, they receive it, everyone is happy, and that's the end of that story, and it's great. With mass retailers, there's a whole kind of underbelly there on the finance side around deductions. So, really there's two types of ways they can honestly ding you. So one of them is called accounts payable deductions, or we call them off-invoice deductions. So basically, Walmart orders 100 cases, you ship them the 100 cases, you invoice them for 100 cases. Somewhere it gets lost in the ether, and Walmart decides they're not going to pay you for those 100 cases. They may say, oh, we only received 80 or whatever it is. And so essentially an off invoice deduction, exactly what it sounds like. They will choose to not pay you in full for whatever you're invoicing. Walmart, for example, has about 75 codes they can go after you for. Target has about 40, Kroger has 8, so on and so forth.
The mafia does a similar sort of shakedown.
Yeah.
Yeah, a little bit. It's called a security money, Eric. And so AP deductions, huge part of what we see in our day to day. If you are selling to a brick and mortar retailer, you are getting AP deductions. It's just a matter of how much. And then on the other side, yet other ways they can ding you, accounts receivable deductions. And essentially that is when the retailer invoices you. And generally that's more around compliance programs. So a lot of retailers, they will set up kind of compliance programs. Jessica mentioned a couple like On Time in Full or the SQEP program. In theory, a lot of these programs are meant to strengthen the supply chain for retailers. So obviously, yes, from their perspective.
Yes.
So for example, On Time in Full for Walmart, their rules are you have to be 98% on time, 98% in full. So if I order 100 cases to arrive on Wednesday, 100 cases need to arrive on Wednesday. And their logic is if you aren't fulfilling it completely, or if it's getting there early or late, that is basically going to impact their ability to make the sale and their ability to make the customer happy. And again, in theory, in an ideal world, all of this makes sense and it tracks. But I think where it all starts to fall apart is the supply chain. We all know, I'm again stating the obvious, is just not the most efficient. And more often than not, which is scary and sad, a lot of these deductions and compliance fines end up being invalid. So it really was a receiving error. They miscounted it because it's some 19-year-old kid scanning boxes in a warehouse at 3 a.m. So they miscounted a PO or a pallet or whatever it is. And then what happens is a lot of these retailers, they take the money first, and you are guilty before proven innocent. So definitely not a U.S. court of law. They take the money and it's on you to go back and say, no, as Jessica mentioned, the proof of delivery or the bills of lading, it's on you to go to Walmart, Target, Kroger, Amazon, whoever it is, and say, hold on, you did get the full 100. Here's that POD or BOL. You need to pay me back in full. But it's a painful process, unfortunately.
Yeah. And the amount of time that the supply chain org is having to spend to validate all of that is so inefficient. Like the teams need to be getting product out the door. And I think there's a lot of time that the teams have to take to investigate all of what's going on, which for better or worse, right? I think it does make those supply chains healthier, to Stacy's point. Like we need to be investigating what's going on, because if it is something we're doing wrong, we're probably doing it against all these other retailers. So let's fix it. But also there's times where the retailer did something wrong. So there's a lot of time kind of being spent, to Stacy's point, on that validation piece, but extremely crucial part. And if you're not doing that today, spend the time. It's worth it for your business to make sure that your business is running smoothly and your supply chain is as healthy as one can hope.
Yeah. So I'm doing the math here in my head, and let me know if this tracks. So if I've got a D2C brand and I have an AOV of $100, that's what I collect and sell. I start out with $100. That's the maximum I can charge, because Walmart, Target isn't going to want to have a more expensive on-shelf price than what they have online. And they need let's call it 50% margin. Now I'm only getting $50 for that thing that was $100. And then I have to pay a 5% bribe so that things don't get returned. And then they're going to take away some stuff because they miscounted and they're saying I'm short.
Yep.
Then they may say, hey, the ship didn't ship on time. And so there's further things are put. It seems like almost a raw deal here. Do D2C brands make money in retail?
I do think that they do. And I think honestly, the best in class suppliers are getting ahead of these issues and also having the leverage to create healthier and stronger supplier agreements. As I think at Harry's, we talked about this a lot, where we'd want to go to Target and to tell them like, oh, you maybe did this or this wrong. And it's like, wait, let's like clean up our house first to our best ability and that we know before we have those conversations. And when we feel like we've really made our supply chain as efficient as possible, and we feel like our process is really efficient, then let's have those conversations. So I think like you're able to negotiate those agreements and you're able to have, to Stacy's point, some of those allowances that we have and lower them down. Like I think like in the beginning, when you're a new supplier, they're probably going to be a little bit higher than what you would be if you're a P&G or J&J or someone who's going to obviously be able to provide that best in class experience. But I do think it all comes down to automation, efficiency, really investing in your supply chain, making sure those teams are speaking to each other and having that communication is the key. We see it so many times, finance teams not talking to supply chain teams, and there's these huge disconnects. And I think the world of deductions and compliance and the world of retail is forcing these teams to have to be communicating all the time. You're working kind of hand in hand. Why send product out in the supply chain and then finance is going to get this deduction? Let's all work together to make sure that we're going to be profitable. So I think that's really the key.
I would agree. And the only thing I would add to that is, again, Jessica and I are broken record. We are going to bang this drum is really understand what you are getting into. Because a lot of times what we see is new brands, they have their one SKU, Walmart said yes, and they're so excited and we're really excited for them too. But they don't realize on average, and for you guys listening, on average, we see suppliers get hit with about 6% off invoice for deductions. And again, this is something Walmart just takes. And it's on you to go get that back if you can.
In addition to the 5% bribe.
Yep. Effective allowance, which you're just going to give. You're just going to give it. You have to. Then on average, they take about 6% for deductions. So that's fun. And then different retailers have different compliance programs, but I keep harping on Walmart just because they're so big, but an example for Walmart, if you're not on time in full, for every non-compliant case, you get hit with a 3% cost of goods sold. So it's kind of like when you drive a new car off the lot, it's like the second a product, you get that PO for that product and you ship it, you're about 10 to 12% in the hole. Just like that. Now, obviously, some of that is recoverable. As long as you're shipping well, you can avoid some of those things. As Jessica said, the longer you're there, you can negotiate some of that down. But again, I feel like a lot of retailers, like they don't really expose this beforehand. And so when you invoice Walmart and suddenly you're getting 15% less than you expected to get, it's a big deal for a lot of, especially smaller suppliers that don't have the ability to just float that cash. And Erin, as you mentioned, a lot of that cash is tied up in inventory or whatever it is. And now it's a 60 to 90 day time period to go get that money back. And what are you going to do? So just really making sure that you know all of this beforehand. So when it comes, you have a plan and you're not surprised and you're baking that into your cost of goods when you're pitching to Walmart and Target and Amazon and all these places.
Yeah, and that's huge. I think for a brand to just assume that whatever price they agree on, they're also implicitly giving 12% back, that's a really helpful heuristic for people to take into it. What does that metric look like with SupplyPike?
Great question. It depends. Obviously, we work with different suppliers at different kind of parts of their journey. I would say best in class, and Jessica, you can talk about how Harry's looked at it, but best in class is you usually want to be about 1% or less. So we work with our suppliers. Obviously, again, this is on average, but when they come in, they're usually at about 6%. And we usually are able to help them get down to about 2 to 3% just by giving them insight into their root cause, helping them just get the money back to start. That's table stakes, but then understanding long-term how you prevent that from happening again, basically stop the bleeding, so to speak. I don't know, Jessica, if you wanted to add anything to that.
Yeah, I was just going to add there's companies that we work with as high as 10%. So I think it's also frightening to know that, but I think it's somewhere to start, right? And it's something that needs to be focused on and the time and attention needs to be spent there. I think a lot of companies wait too long and then they're in the whole 10%. When it's, what are we waiting for? The sooner we can understand what's going on in the business, the sooner we're going to be more profitable. So yeah, at Harry's, I think we were able to reduce it. And I think it really was because we brought Supply Pike software on, we were able to automate the process, get money back, but also spend the time on root causation, really investing the time in the supply chain, understanding what was going on, understand the nuance of Walmart versus Target versus Amazon. They're not the same. They're very different. And making sure that you're catering to that. We have to, or you shouldn't be. You just shouldn't be in those businesses, because if you're going to treat them all the same, you're going to feel that cost on the other side. And then what's the point? You're not making any money and you're not going to be profitable there. And I think it's for the customer too, and that relationship with the retailer, showing them that you care and showing them that you understand the guidelines of their business. And then that's only going to help improve that relationship and hopefully negotiate those other terms over time to be more profitable, get more shelf space, whatever it may be that you want out of them as well.
Yeah, it reminds me, I was talking to a brand a couple weeks ago, and it was a D2C brand that had gotten into Target. It was their big deal. They're super happy with it. But they ended up getting so much deductions and so many delays in payments beyond just the payment terms that they were like, I think Target's going to put us out of business. And it was just this terrible thing that, like, I feel like I have to cut $2 or $3 million worth of revenue just so I have a viable cash solution for what we're doing. It was definitely something that kind of stuck with me. It's like how difficult retail can be, especially for a small, nimble company that's just on the up and up.
Definitely, because you think you need more hands to be able to understand what's going on. And those small companies I feel for, because they're just trying to get product out the door and they don't have time to read the 200-page compliance documents.
It's okay. ChatGPT is going to take care of all that stuff.
Oh, yeah, true.
No, I think, Eric, you bring up a really great point. And it's something that obviously we talked about our software, and kind of what we do is we really help to automate the deductions recovery, which is really cool. But the part that I really wanted to talk about that I'm so proud of is, so we actually have a completely free education arm called Supplier Wiki, where we have a lot of free articles, resources, ebooks, and things like that on how you can be a best-in-class supplier. We love partnering with companies like ISBA, because I think the three of us can all agree, like, it is dang near impossible to find any sort of actual helpful information about being a supplier online. Like, most of the time you learn because you've done it for 10 years, or somebody who can show you how to run that one report in Retail Link or whatever it is. You're not going to get this support. And so I think it's really cool that slowly but surely this ecosystem of education is coming up to help suppliers. And it's really cool. Even what y'all do at ISBA as well.
Stacy, you bring up such a good point about that as well. I think if you're a new D2C brand going into the world of retail, I think that's probably one of the biggest takeaways I had when I started with Harry's was there's not going to be like a person that gets on the phone with you or an email to help you answer a lot of those questions that you're wondering on the supply chain side of what do I do if this happens? That doesn't really exist. They have some customer service lines and emails and stuff, but to actually have a physical human being to come back and have a conversation with you is extremely rare. So if you do find a contact, or if you have contacts in your network, like, use them. It's extremely helpful. And of course, the shameless plug of Supplier Wiki, I found as a client too, like in my time, just to have something defined super clearly that is not in like the jargon of the 200-page document that could tell me like, this is what this code is. This is how you fix it. That is priceless, I think, in just being able to solve a problem quickly and move on.
You know, it's funny. I just think about how many brokers or sales companies have been started just because so-and-so worked at Target and knows suppliers first.